Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear friends and participants. Welcome to this session of Quran 14 series. Uh, we'll be discussing a new surah. This is surah number 58, Surah Al-Hadid in this session. And as I explained last time, from Surah Al-Hadid, which is the 57th surah of the Quran, the Medinan surahs of chapter number 6 will begin. So we have been studying chapter number 6 of the Quran, which starts off with Surah Qaf, which is the 50th surah, and it goes on to the 56th surah. These seven surahs are all Meccan in nature. They were revealed in the city of Mecca, and therefore they addressed the people of Mecca, which were, of course, the idolaters or the polytheists of Mecca. And now that we are studying the next phase of the Prophet Muhammad's preaching mission, and that is the Medinan phase. So, as we all know, that after spending about 12 years in Mecca, he migrated to Medina, and here he actually was given the reins of power of Medina. He was virtually the ruler of Medina. There was a pact signed between him and the Jewish tribes of Medina, as a result of which he assumed the authority of the chief of Medina or the ruler of Medina. And as I have been explaining, that the reason that this ministry of the Prophet has been divided in two distinct um phases, I would say, is that in the first phase, which is the Meccan phase, the idolaters have been addressed, and in the next phase, which is the Medinan phase, basically the people of the book have been addressed. And not only that, because of the fact that Muslims had become a collectivity by then, so the Muslims have also been addressed. And in this particular surah, Surah Hadid, from which the Medinan surahs begin, we find that Muslims have been, in fact, addressed almost on all occasions. And as you will see from the study of the surah, that most of these Muslims were weak Muslims. They had just entered the fold of Islam, or if they had entered earlier on, they were weak in faith, bordering towards hypocrisy, and anything that would happen uh, adversely would shake their belief in Islam. And so they are specially addressed, and they are told that, well, if you have entered the folds of Islam, then you must remember that there is going to be a final battle between the good and evil, which is the case in the which is the case for all prophets of God who are messengers. The forces of good and evil, they are polarized, they are isolated and separated, and then God pronounces his verdict by actually rewarding his messengers and their followers and giving them dominance over his opponents or over their opponents. So this is something of a established practice of God, which I have discussed on several occasions, that in the times of God's messengers, these miniature days of judgment, they are set up, and they are basically proof of that greater day of judgment, which will once be set up uh, at the end of time, which we call the day of judgment. And so that lesser day of judgment, or the miniature day of judgment that was set up for the last time on planet Earth, was in the times of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And for this, of course, the believers were prepared in Medina that they will be launching an onslaught on the idolaters as well as the people of the book. And if they don't desist from their ill ways, and if they do not abstain from intentionally denying any further, then they shall be taken to task. So, with this background, let us start our study of Surah Hadid. As I said, this is the 57th surah of the Quran, and it primarily addresses Muslims who lay claim to faith, and they are ones who are actually urged to spend for the cause of God. So remember that in the times of the prophets of God, there were no standing armies, and people who were believers, people who were companions of the Prophet, they would be required to fight battles. And for this, they would also be urged to spend, because, of course, battles cannot be fought without proper resources. And for those resources, the Quran has often appealed to believers to make available these resources as best as they can. So, starting off with the first section of the surah, the first paragraph, as you can see, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. سبح لله ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم له ملك السماوات والأرض يحيي ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير هو الأول والآخر والظاهر والباطن وهو بكل شيء عليم.
Fatma and Ariba, can I request you to read the translation of the passage?
In the name of God, the most gracious and ever merciful, all that is in the heavens and the earth has glorified God, and He is the mighty, the wise. It is He who has sovereignty over the heavens and the earth. He alone orders life and death, has the power over all things. It is He who is the first and the last, as well as the apparent and the hidden too. And He has the knowledge of all things.
Thank you. I assume this is Ariba.
Yes.
This is actually the opening passage, which again is meant to start off the surah with the fact that the knowledge of God is all embracing, that He has power over everything, and that everything that is in the heavens and the earth, they glorify God. And when the word sabbaha is used in the Quran in this way, uh, actually signifying glorification of the Almighty. It means that it absolves him of all the negative traits and it actually affirms all positive traits. This, of course, is an important warning that all the good traits are they exist in God, and He is devoid of any negativity. And not only that, He has sovereignty over the heavens and the earth, which mean that actually there is no one else who is an associate to Him in in this governance. And also, it is He who actually ordains here. Actually means that He is the person responsible for giving life and death, and He has power over all things. And this phrase, you might well note it. The Arabic is "Huwal Awwal wal Akhir wal Zahir wal Batin." Actually, it is one of the best descriptions of God in the Quran, vis-a-vis time and space. So it says that when there was no one, He was still there. When there shall be no one, He shall still be there. And He existed when there was, I mean, He existed when there was nothing, and He will still exist when everything will be finished. So time and space are the two concepts through which we can gauge the existence of anything. So here it actually says that time and space is something which is beyond the confines, and God is beyond the confines of time and space. When there was no time, He was there, and when there was no space, the concept of space, He was still there. So obviously, this is slightly difficult for us to imagine, but the picture which is given to us is that we should not regard God to be someone like our own selves who is confined to the coordinates of time and space, and He knows everything. His knowledge is all embracing, and therefore, all people who have professed faith, however small a deed that they might do in seclusion, will come to His notice, and He will reward them for that. And if it is a bad deed, of course, then they should expect to be punished for that. So let's move on to the next paragraph. It says. هو الذي خلق السماوات والأرض في 6 أيام ثم استوى على العرش يعلم ما يلج في الأرض وما يخرج منها وما ينزل من السماء وما يعرج فيها وهو معكم أينما كنتم والله بما تعملون بصير له ملك السماوات والأرض وإلى الله ترجع الأمور يولج الليل في النهار ويولج النهار في الليل وهو عليم بذات الصدور.
Azan, please read the translation.
It is He alone who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and then to govern them, mounted the throne. He knows all that goes into the earth and all that emerges from it, and all that descends from the heavens, and all that ascends in it. And He is with you wherever you are, and God watches all that you do. To him belongs the sovereignty of the heavens and the earth, and to Him all affairs turns. It is He who makes the night pass into the day, and the day pass into the night, and He even knows the secrets of the hearts.
Thank you for this reading. Well, as you can clearly see, that there is no difficulty in this passage. It just tells us that how all embracing the knowledge of God is and how close He is to us. Wherever we are, He is with us. He doesn't need any time travel or space travel. is there for us wherever we are, and He is aware of whatever we do. One thing perhaps you would like to note here is that it says that He has created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and after that He uh, mounted His throne to govern them. So, first of all, the word 6 days has to be understood in its proper context. The days here refer to the days of God. They don't refer to our earth days, of course, which consist of 24 hours. We know from other places in the Quran that at times the one day of God is equal to 1,000 years, uh, 1,000 earth years. And similarly, at some other instances, it is mentioned that 50,000 earth years make up one day of God. So you can clearly see how this phenomena has to be understood. When it is said in the Quran that the heavens and the earth have been made in 6 days, then don't think that this is talking about the days that we are used to. And another thing which might be important to note here is that the Almighty could have created this whole universe in a single second or even before that. And as He does, for example, when this earth would be destroyed and the new earth or the new heavens and earth would be brought into existence, it is told us, we have been told that in the Quran, that this will happen in the wink of an eye. And so the Almighty works in both ways. At times, something that He wants to create, it is created in the blink of an eye, and at times it is created in a very gradual way. And here, when it is said that the heavens and the earth have been created in 6 days, it actually refers to the elaborate arrangement and the painstaking way in which God has made this universe. This is something to how, for example, a vegetation comes into being. We sow seeds and they don't immediately sprout. They take their times and then they come out. Similarly, the children or human beings which are born, they are not born immediately. They also take some time. And then after their birth as well, it's not that they entered adulthood immediately. Again, that takes time. So you see, there are processes which are going on this earth in which all this gradual nature of or gradual uh, ability of things is projected. And the reason here is to tell us that, well, if the Almighty has taken so much pains in making such a thing, then He's not going to leave all this like it is, and things are not just going to end without any conclusion. And the conclusion which every man of understanding, every person of intellect should draw from this is that one day He shall hold everyone to account for the favors that He has blessed them with. And another thing that you might note here is that that there were philosophers in ancient times who would say that, well, God is just the first cause. Once He has brought this universe into existence, he has nothing to do with this universe. He's not governing the affairs of this universe, and He's just aloof from it. And there are some other deities to whom He has delegated this rule. So the Quran again dispels this notion. It says that, well, after creating the heavens and the earth, the Almighty did not go to one side or just went away and left its administration to someone else. It is He Himself who is governing the universe. So the word throne here is just used metaphorically for God to convey to us this fact that it is God who has created this universe, and it is God who is still there and governing its affairs. So no one should have any misconception that after its creation he just vanished, or maybe he just became passive. That's not the case. Okay, let's move on to the next paragraph. It says, Aminu billahi wa rasulihi wa anfiqu mimma ja'alakum mustakhlafina fih فالذين آمنوا منكم وأنفقوا لهم أجر كبير وما لكم لا تؤمنون بالله والرسول يدعوكم لتؤمنوا بربكم وقد أخذ ميثاقكم إن كنتم مؤمنين.
Move on to Muhammad.
So you also glorify God and profess true faith in God and His messenger, and spend from the things He has entrusted you with. Thus, those of you who embraced faith in this manner and have spent in the way of God, for them is a rich reward. And what has happened to you that you do not profess true faith in God and His messenger, even though the messenger is inviting you to profess faith in your Lord? And He has also taken a strong covenant of listen and obey from you, if you really believe.
Thank you, Muhammad, for reading this paragraph out for us. So, again, this, as you would have remembered, I've just indicated that earlier on that basically Muslims who are weak in faith are addressed in this surah. So, this verse actually starts off by telling us that if the heavens and the earth, or everything which, or every object of the heavens and the earth, is glorifying God, which means that from its own actions and from its own words and utterances, it is absolving God from all the negative traits, then why is it that human beings are also not doing this? So, and especially here, the address is towards Muslims who were in Medina at that time. So they are told that just as the heavens and the earth they glorify God, you too should uh, follow suit and glorify God, profess faith in Him and His Messenger. And as I said earlier on, that this is one of the surahs in which Muslims are prepared for that final onslaught. And of course, for that final onslaught, they had to be prepared for the war, and as well as to contribute for the expenses of war. So it is said here that those of you who have embraced faith in this manner and have spent in the way of God, for them there is rich reward. And what has happened to you that you do not profess true faith in God and His messenger, even though the messenger is inviting you to profess faith in your Lord? So this is basically some cautioning and prodding going on from the Quran. It tells these people that why is it that they have laid claim to faith, but the essence of faith has still not found its way inside their hearts. And it's just lip service that they are doing. They're just expressing that they are Muslims, whereas the requisite of being a Muslim, which of course means that you truly believe in God and His messenger, especially when the messenger is inviting you to profess this faith, it has to be undertaken. And if they are real believers, then they should stop the thinking of things which might distract them or divert them, or as you can see that there were things which had made them hesitant. And people of weak faith always think that, well, maybe something is not correct, and they always have this vacillation in them, this thought in them that maybe they're still not doing the right thing. So they are being cautioned and prodded here, well, that once you have entered the folds of Islam, just give up this hesitancy, give up this reluctance. And as the word itself demands, when the prophet of God is in between them, they should just profess faith and look ahead, because God's help is going to arrive very soon. Okay, now let's move on to the next paragraph. It says, هو الذي ينزل على عبده آيات بينات ليخرجكم من الظلمات إلى النور وإن الله بكم لرؤوف رحيم وما لكم ألا تنفقوا في سبيل الله ولله ميراث السماوات والأرض لا يستوي منكم من أنفق من قبل الفتح وقاتل أولئك أعظم درجة من الذين أنفقوا من بعد وقاتلوا وكلا وعد الله الحسنى والله بما تعملون خبير.
Raheel, it's your turn.
It is He who is bringing down clear revelations to His servant to lead you out of darkness into light. And in reality, God is very compassionate to you and extremely merciful. Why should you not spend in the cause of God when all the inheritance of the heavens and earth is going to return to God? It should be clear to you that those of you who spend in charity and wage war for the cause of truth after the conquest will never be equal to those who spend in charity and wage war for the cause of truth before the conquest. They will surely have a greater status than those who spend in charity and wage war afterwards, although God has promised each but a good reward. Remember that God is fully aware of all that you do.
Thank you, Rahil, for reading this out. So, as you can see, again, these weak Muslims or Muslims who had laid claim to faith, but they were not fulfilling its obligations. They are told that, well, look at the fact that the Almighty has brought them into light from darkness. And when all this thing is happening, then they should understand that as far as the wealth that they have, if they spend it in charity for other people and for the cause of war, then this is something which is going to always be rewarding for them. And the conquest referred to here is the conquest of Mecca, of course, which took place in the 8th year of the Prophet's migration. And so they are told that, well, if you wage war And if before waging that war for the conquest of Mecca, you spend for the cause of God, and remember that that spending is going to earn you a lot more than if you spend after this conquest. And this is obvious. You see, when the crunch time is there, if you do something in crunch time, in the time of crisis, then that is always more rewarding. And we all know that before the conquest of Mecca, all the Muslims were apprehensive. They were all in a situation in which there was this, although they were clearly assured by the Almighty, but the element of anxiety was still there, the element of adversity was still there. So people who would spend in these adverse circumstances are rewarded much more than people who spend in normal circumstances when everything is conducive. And then again, it is said that their status is much higher than the status of those who will spend afterwards. But again, as far as reward is concerned, God is going to reward both of them. So once again, you can see there is a strong appeal to spend for the cause of God. And here, as I said, the cause of God is the war that was envisaged to be waged against these deniers and these disbelievers. But as I said, that for this, these weak Muslims have been urged to empty their pockets, and they're also told, as we will presently see, that whatever they spend is going to come back to them. And in fact, this is something which is going to benefit them solely. It's not that the money that they spend is going to go waste. It's going to it is actually their real asset in this regard. So let's now move on to the next paragraph. It says, "Man zal lazi yuqridu Allah qarzan hasana fayudha'afahu lahu wa lahu ajrun kareem. يوم ترى المؤمنين والمؤمنات يسعى نورهم بين أيديهم وبأيمانهم بشراكم اليوم جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها ذلك هو الفوز العظيم. يوم يقول المنافقون والمنافقات للذين آمنوا انظرونا نقتبس من نوركم قيل ارجعوا وراءكم فالتمسوا نورا فضرب بينهم بسور له باب باطنه فيه الرحمة وظاهره من قبله العذاب ينادونهم ألم نكن معكم قالوا بلى ولكنكم فتنتم أنفسكم وتربصتم وارتبتم وغرتكم الأماني حتى جاء أمر الله وغركم بالله الغرور فاليوم لا يؤخذ منكم فدية ولا من الذين كفروا مأواكم النار هي مولاكم وبئس المصير."
Saim, it's your turn. Please go ahead and read the translation.
Who will now give a loan to God, a good loan, so that he may increase it however much he wants to, for him, and there be a noble recompense for him on the day when you will see believing men and believing women, such that their light is moving in front of them and on their right. Today you have glad tidings of these orchards below which streams flow. You will abide in them forever. This, in fact, is the supreme triumph, the day when the hypocrites, both men and women, will call out to the believers, "Please give us the chance to gain some benefit from your light." But they will be told, "No, stand back and there seek the light for yourselves." Then a wall will be erected between them and the believers, in which there will be a door. Inside it there will be mercy, and outside it torment. They will plead to them, "Were we not with you in the previous world?" "Yes," they will reply. "You were indeed with us, but you indulged in mischief, waited for our turn of fortunes, remained in doubts, and your desires continued to deceive you until God's verdict materialized. And that great deceiver continued to deceive you about God until the very end. That is why today no ransom will be accepted from you or from those who had openly disbelieved. The fire is the abode for all of you. It is your place of return, and what an evil abode it is."
Thank you, Saim. So, dear participants and friends, you can see that in this paragraph, what we would clearly see is a description of how the people would be like on the day of judgment, and especially the people who are hypocrites. They are told that this is how they would be faring on the day of judgment. And as far as the believers are concerned, they will be surrounded by light from all sides. But before this description is actually depicted here, you can see that spending in the cause of God is actually called giving loan to the Almighty. So this is such a an affectionate way from the Almighty. It actually tells us, well, when you spend for my way or for my cause, remember that it is a loan which is incumbent upon me to pay you back, and I'm not just going to pay you back, but I'm going to pay you back manyfold. So this is a very affectionate and a very powerful appeal, in fact, for people to spend for the cause of God, because this spending, God says, is like a loan on me. It's like you give me a loan. And if I take a loan from you, I'm not just going to return the principal amount, I'm going to return it, a fair degree above and uh, beyond what you actually lent. So this is a sort of very effective appeal, and we find this occurring in the Quran in various verses. And then, of course, this description of the hypocrites is very, very harrowing. It says that there will be a wall erected between the believers and these hypocrites, and they would try to come beyond that wall, cross that wall, because crossing that wall will be the place where there would be mercy from the Almighty. And before you actually do that, there will be a lot of punishment on this side of the wall, and they would try to cross that wall and ask the believers that, well, could you please let us in through the door between this wall? But of course, this would not happen. And this is how the believers would actually reply. They will say that you were indeed with us, but you indulged in mischief and waited for our turn of fortunes. So their crimes and their sins would be enumerated before them, and they would be told that, well, today want to cross over into our own compound by crossing this wall into the land of mercy, of course, referring to paradise in the hereafter. But this is not going to happen because you deceived yourselves, and you were deceived by the great deceiver, referring obviously to Satan. So therefore, it's the worst. This paragraph actually ends by telling them that now no ransom will be taken from you, of course, referring to the hypocrites, nor from these disbelievers, and their only fate is now the fire of hell. And it is this fire of hell which is going to be their abode, and it is one of the worst places, and in fact, the worst place that one can imagine. Okay, let's move on to the next paragraph, or next two paragraphs actually. So it starts off by saying that Alam ya'nin allazina amanu an takhsha'a qulubuhum li zikrillahi wa ma nazala min al-haq wa la yakunu kallazina min qablu fatala alayhim al-amadu faqasat qulubuhum wa kathirun minhum fasiqun اعلموا أن الله يحيي الأرض بعد موتها قد بينا لكم الآيات لعلكم تعقلون.
Sinay, it's your turn.
It is not time for those who lay claim to faith that their hearts submit to God's reminder and to the truth which has been revealed by Him. And these people should not be like those who were given the book before this. Then a long period passed on them until their hearts hardened, and today most of them are disobedient. Take the initiative. It may well be that God melts your hearts. Keep in mind that God restores the earth to life even after its death. We have made plain our revelations to you so that you may understand.
Thank you, Sine. So you can see that once again, this the surah is continuing with that very strong appeal towards those hypocrites, and because of the fact that some of them had indulged in acts which, of course, they would not have been proud of. They are being told that they lay claim to faith, they claim to be Muslims, but they are not. Faith has actually not entered their hearts, because once faith enters their hearts, they submit to God and they don't question His directives, and at the same time they are compliant to what the Prophet tells them. So they are told that don't be like people who were before you, of course referring to the people of the book who were given the book. The book here refers to the Torah, the Old Testament, and as we can see from history that the followers of Moses, they always had their pranks to play, and they were the ones who would always be on the lookout to pester the Prophet Moses. And we see from the Quran how they have been severely rebuked for this attitude. And the verse says that just as their hearts hardened after the book was given to them, it should not happen in your case as well. That just as the book is now being given to you, that you also similarly behave. And finally, passage here at the end tells us that you have to take the initiative. You must come before the Almighty in a way that makes you someone who listens and obeys what directives He are giving. And you must remember that it is God who gives life, it is God who gives death. And just as the earth, when it dies away, it is given life by the Almighty through the rain which comes down. So this is something which is going to happen to mankind as well, that one day when they die, God is going to restore them to life again. And this is then mentioned in the form of an explanation that if you realize that just as dead land is revived by rain, similarly dead people are going to be revived one day to face their accountability. Okay, now we move on to the next part. It says, إن المصدقين والمصدقات وأقرضوا الله قرضا حسنا يضاعف لهم ولهم أجر كريم. Uh, والذين آمنوا بالله ورسوله أولئك هم الصديقون والشهداء عند ربهم لهم أجرهم ونورهم والذين كفروا وكذبوا بآياتنا أولئك أصحاب الجحيم.
Senor, it's your turn.
Keep in mind that men and women who spend for the cause of God and those who have given a generous loan to God will be repaid manifold, and for them is a noble recompense. And those who have truly professed faith in God and His messengers will be among the Siddiq and the Shuhada. For them will also be their reward and also their light. As for those who have disbelieved and denied our revelations, it is they who will be the companions of hell.
So thank you for this, Himer. So you see, once again, the surah tells us that as far as the spending in charity is concerned, people must not forget that if they have given a generous loan to God, which will be paid back in manifold by Him, that they are going to be thoroughly rewarded. And it is these people who have actually professed faith in God and His messenger, and they are the Siddiq. The word Siddiq actually means a person who testifies to the truth of someone, and therefore people who were the foremost in coming up and testifying to the prophet as his messenger, as a messenger of God, they are called Siddiq. And as far as the Shuhada are concerned, they are the ones who bore witness to the religion of truth before other people. And God says that for them there is going to be reward and their light. Again, the light which was mentioned in the previous passage, which would lead them on the day of judgment, it would be on their sides and on their fronts. And as for those who disbelieved and denied, then they should know that they are the companions of hell. So, as you would be knowing, that this is just something which is very common in the Quran, that the fate of disbelievers and believers is mentioned side by side. And as you can see, this has happened here as well. So now let's move on to the next paragraph. It says, اعلموا أنما الحياة الدنيا لعب ولهو وزينة وتفاخر بينكم وتكاثر في الأموال والأولاد كمثل غيث أعجب الكفار نباته ثم يهيج فتراه مصفرا ثم يكون حطاما وفي الآخرة عذاب شديد ومغفرة من الله ورضوان وما الحياة الدنيا إلا متاع الغرور.
Umar, can I request you to read the translation for this passage?
Do not evade this spending and bear in mind that the parable of the life of this world as sport and entertainment and embellishment, and in the matter of wealth and children, a mutual show off and a quest to outdo one another in them, is that of rain which produces a crop that lures the hearts of these disbelievers. Then it blooms and you see it turn yellowish orange. Then a calamity strikes and it turns into bits and pieces. Bear in mind that after this there is a grievous penalty in the hereafter, and the forgiveness of God and His pleasure to. In reality, the life of this world is but a provision of deception.
Thank you, Umar. So, as you can see, that once again, this paragraph is urging people to spend for the cause of God, for the imminent battle which was going to be waged ultimately. And although we know from history that the battle never took place because the opponents of the Prophet, the rivals of the Prophet, all of them professed faith, and the need for the battle never arose. But of course, this was something which was left for the future. And before that future arrived, the preparation for war was always there. So this surah is actually preparing these Muslims, especially weak in faith, bordering towards hypocrisy, that they should spend for the cause of God, and this is going to be returned to them. And they should not be deceived by one element of this world, and that element is in which we regard this world to be a place of sport and entertainment, and a place where we can amuse ourselves, and it's a place that we can enjoy the abundance of wealth in children. Now, this verse, of course, doesn't mean that this world or this worldly life is completely a life of sport. No, the reverse is actually referring to us to the fact that that part of our life in which we regard it to be a sport and an entertainment, that should not be something which is going to deceive us. And again, the comparison is that it is like rain which produces a crop that lures the hearts of these disbelievers, and then it blooms and you see it turn yellowish. So it's like telling us that, well, when you are enjoying life or part of life, of course, then you don't realize that one day that life is going to end, and every entertainment that you form or you think of is going to take its terminal situation. And so, just as people who think that their crop is now going to bloom and the orchard is now going to blossom, you see that it has turned yellow and it is actually shattered to pieces. So the parable of life is no different. You actually nurture everything around you. You're nourished by the elements of nature, and at the same time you enjoy life so much that you become engrossed in it. You totally lose uh, track of your own responsibilities, and one day you end up regretting all that you did. And not only this, what will happen to such people? Because remember, here the adversaries are the hypocrites and the believers who are weak in faith. That on the day of judgment also there'll be a severe torment for such people. And on the other hand, people who realize that this is not the right attitude for them is maghfirah, which means forgiveness and God's pleasure. And actually the paragraph ends on a verse which is something that all of us might do well in noting. It says, "Wamal hayatud dunya illa mata'ul ghurur." In reality, the life of this world is but a provision of deception. So the actual import of this verse is very strong, and it says that, well, this world is not a place that one should always think that it's going to remain forever, because its lurings and its temptations are so powerful that we tend to lose track of some of the other responsibilities that we might have. So this is a trial from God, that in spite of these temptations and lurements, we have to on the one hand, of course, there are certain temptations and similar things which are a means of embellishment and entertainment that we can really enjoy because they have their own utility. But it should not be that we become deceived by them. We become engrossed in them so much that, as I said, we lose track of our own moral responsibilities. So it's like a double-edged sword. And we have to realize that on the one hand, we can benefit from these things, but on the other hand, that this benefit should not be to such an extent that we lose track of our own responsibilities. So the next paragraph actually follows up on what has just been said, and the words are سابقوا إلى مغفرة من ربكم وجنة عرضها كأرض السماء والأرض أعدت للذين آمنوا بالله ورسوله ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم.
Zoha Nadine, please go ahead and read the translation for this verse.
For this reason, strive fervently while outdoing one another towards the forgiveness of your Lord, and for a paradise as vast as the heavens and the earth. It has been prepared for those who truly believe in God and His messengers. Such is the grace of God. He bestows it on whomsoever He wills, and great is God's grace.
Thank you, Zoha. We are really enchanted by your passion in reading this passage. So thank you once again. So as you can see that once again there is this appeal, the element of appeal found in the Quran here, that it tells us that, well, you have to work hard in outdoing one another. So we do become people who enter into competition, especially if it consists of a lot of things in this world. So we are the sense of competition is always found in us. It is something which is related to our own instincts. So here the Quran says that, well, if you have to have a competition, if you must compete with other people, let it be for forgiveness and let it be to enter paradise. So in order to outdo each other, in seeking God's forgiveness, in seeking that paradise which awaits us, that is something which is really, really something that we should do. So you see how the Quran turns that instinct in its own favor, in our own favor, in fact, by telling us that, well, competitions we do enter for a lot of material gains, but let us also enter into this competition in which we outdo other people in asking for God's forgiveness. We become even more penitent, we become even more attached towards the Almighty, and in this particular way, we are able to win this competition. And again, it says that this paradise for which we have entered into this competition is such that we just cannot imagine its bounds. It is as vast as the heavens and the earth. And this is God's grace that we will be bestowed with. And therefore, this is something that we should all cherish and relish. Okay, now let's move on to the next paragraph. It's ما أصاب من مصيبة في الأرض ولا في أنفسكم إلا في كتاب من قبل أن نبرأها إن ذلك على الله يسير لكي لا تأسوا على ما فاتكم ولا تفرحوا بما آتاكم والله لا يحب كل مختال فخور الذين يبخلون ويأمرون الناس بالبخل ومن يتولى فإن الله هو الغني الحميد.
Okay, I'll request Zara Burney.
They do not spend in the way of God because they want to save it in case some calamity visits them. Remember that there is no such calamity that visits you in the earth or in your own persons that we have not written in a book before. We bring it into existence. This is very easy for God. You have been made to understand this so that you may not grieve on things you lose or be proud of what God has blessed you with. And remember that God does not love at all the haughty and the conceited, who are stingy themselves and urge others to stinginess too. And those who show indifference even after this warning, then God does not the slightest care for them because God is self-sufficient and possesses all worthy attributes.
Thank you, Zara, for reading this out for us. So again, this is an assurance that these verses sound to us. And one of the reasons because of which people would not spend for the cause of God would be that they would think that, well, they must save the money that they have lest some calamity visit them. And at that time, they would have nothing to spend. So they would generally become stingy. And one of the reasons that would keep them from spending would be that they save this money for any future calamity. And it is on this notion that the Almighty is actually cautioning them that remember there is no calamity which visits them, and they should remember that any calamity which visits them is in God's knowledge. This word which says that written in a book it actually signifies the knowledge of God. It tells us that how the Almighty's knowledge is all embracing. So therefore, if there is going to be a calamity in future, then this is something that they just cannot avoid. So money is not going to do anything for them because when it comes, it will come because of God's permission. And when it comes because of God's permission, then at that time, the right attitude will be judged on the basis of the attitude that they have adopted. And it is also said that if you understand this, then you will always be very, very uh, you'll encourage your own selves, you'll motivate your own selves to spend in the way of God, because you know that God is going to create that calamity if ever that calamity is going to come. But then remember that this as far as such calamities are concerned, they just cannot be turned away. So remember that the money that you spend or the amount that you spend at that time is something that's going to be really be of worth to you. And also remember that God doesn't love people who are conceited, who are proud, and who are stingy, especially who are miserly and people who urge others to miserliness as well. So remember that one of the things that these misers do or these stingy people do, that they urge other people to become stingy as well. And this is actually a psychological tactic because once other people also take towards stinginess, then there would be no one left to call other people as stingy. So in order to be called stingy or miserly, they would ask other people also to become miserly so that no one remains who can call them to be a miser. And God says that remember that this is the worst thing that you can do. As far as spending for the cause of God is concerned, remember God is classifying it as a loan to Himself, and that loan is going to be returned many folds. And again, gauge from this fact that if you study these verses, they might be slightly confusing and puzzling, as that why is God asking so much repeatedly, time and again, from these weak Muslims to spend for the cause of the Almighty? Then again, as I said, you have to understand the circumstances of that time. In those times, there were no standing armies. In those times, all battles had to be fought by resources which were pooled and contributed by people who were gathered around the Prophet. And this surah, as you can see, is the surah in which Muslims are prepared or being prepared for that final onslaught. And for this, of course, if they had to wage a battle, they had to come forth not only with their persons, but also with their wealth, so that both of as far as human resources concerned and as far as material resources are concerned, they are joined together for this particular campaign. And you can clearly see that this miserliness was the result of withholding money for the cause of God, thinking that a calamity would visit them. And this passage actually tells them that the calamity is going to visit them, and they should always remember that what they have is something which is a gift of God. And because of the fact that it is something which God has ordained for them, they should not be very happy for something that they have, because this is God's plan. And similarly, if they have been deprived of something, they should not feel so depressed, because again, this is part of God's plan and this is in God's knowledge. So, as far as they themselves are concerned, they have to behave in a manner in which the money that they have, or the resources that they have, or the human resource that they have to be presented at the right time. Okay. So we move on to the next paragraph. It says, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلُنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْمِيزَانَ لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ وَأَنزَلْنَا الْحَدِيدَ فِيهِ بَأْسٌ شَدِيدٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ وَلِيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ وَلِيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ I think there is a word missing here. It should be وَلِيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ مَنْ يَنْصُرُهُ رُسُلَهُ بِالْغَيْبِ Inna Allah Qawiyyun Aziz. Okay, please go ahead
Zoya,
with the
Prani, please go ahead.
They raise objections on jihad. Tell them, we have sent our messengers with very clear and lucid arguments, and revealed with them our book, that is, the scale, so that people adhere to justice regarding truth and falsehood. And we sent down from iron, which has great power, and also other uses for people, so that they may benefit from it, and so that after conclusive communication of the truth from the messengers, their rejectors are punished through it, and in this manner God sifts out people who help him and his messengers without seeing him. Otherwise, undoubtedly, God is very powerful and mighty.
Thank you, Zoya, for this reading. So you see, once again, the objections which they had against this war, or the holy war, which we call jihad, was that they would abstain from this, and one of the reasons that they would cite is that this is not what the earlier prophets of God did. They never fought like this, and they are actually being told that they have a wrong conception of history. So the Almighty says that I sent all my messengers with these arguments and with the clear book and with the scale, which of course refers to the book of God, and also iron, which was sent down by him to wage war for people who reject this, in spite of conclusive communication. So remember that the jihad that we are talking about here is specific to the companions of God. So we've talked about jihad at other instances, and we have seen that there are two forms of jihad which are mentioned in the Quran. So one of them is specific to the messengers of God, and that is between truth and falsehood. And once the institution of messengerhood has been terminated with the last prophet, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this form of jihad, or this form of holy war, has totally been ended in our Sharia, because it relates to messengers of God. And for them, the battle between truth and falsehood is actually something which has to be waged at the end of the ministry of every messenger of God, because this makes that lesser day of judgment come into being, and we've been discussing this. But then there's another form of jihad, which of course this particular surah is not discussing, and which still uh, is still operational in the Sharia, and that is the jihad which is done against oppression and persecution, and that too when there is all diplomatic ties have failed, and of course this jihad has to be carried out by the state authorities, not by any individuals. So that is another different form of jihad which we may discuss at some other time. But the jihad or holy war, which is being mentioned here, is between truth and falsehoods. And this form of jihad is something which has only been authorized to be conducted by God's messengers, and therefore now the Almighty is recounting the history of these messengers, and as we shall see in the immediately next paragraph, that He has named other messengers as well, who similarly conducted jihad and holy war in order to establish that miniature day of judgment in their own eras, and this should not be a cause of any misconception. And the objections that they were raising against jihad, as I said, had a lot to do with this history. So this history is now being recounted once again before them, and they are being told that this is not correct, that the earlier messengers never waged jihad. They did so, and this is how they did so, as we shall just read in the next paragraph. And that goes on like this. ولقد أرسلنا نوحا وإبراهيم وجعلنا في ذريتهم النبوة والكتاب فمنهم مهتد وكثير منهم فاسقون ثم قفينا على آثارهم برسلنا وقفينا بعيسى ابن مريم وآتيناه الإنجيل وجعلنا في قلوب الذين اتبعوه رأفة ورحمة ورهبانية ابتدعوها ما كتبناها عليهم إلا ابتغاء رضوان الله فما رعوها حق رعايتها فآتينا الذين آمنوا منهم أجرهم وكثير منهم فاسقون.
Just move on to Ali.
And we had also sent forth Noah and Abraham as messengers for this very purpose, and had initiated in the progenies prophethood and made the recipients of the book. So some of them adopted guidance, and most of them turned out to be disobedient. Then in their footsteps we sent more of our messengers as well, and also sent Jesus, son of Mary, in their footsteps, and gave him the gospel, and put compassion and mercy in the hearts of his followers. But monasticism they invented themselves. We did not make it obligatory upon them. However, we did make it obligatory upon them to seek God's pleasure, but they did not observe its bounds as they should have. However, those among them who adhered to faith, we gave them their reward, but most of them turned out to be disobedient.
Thank you, Ali, for this reading. So you see, the history is now being recounted before them, and they are being told that for the very purpose of punishing evil and for the very purpose of establishing a miniature day of judgment on this earth in their own eras, Noah and Abraham had been sent with the same mandate, and they were given signs from the Almighty. They were told that if their people intentionally deny them, then God is going to wipe them out. And we know that the deluge, the famous storm, with which the people of Noah were inflicted with, is something which has become proverbial in all religious literature. So people boarded the ark, and only the ones who boarded the ark with Noah were the ones who were salvaged, and they were saved from that storm. And similarly, in Abraham's times also, this happened. And now you see, one of the things that this verse actually, or this passage actually points to the fact, is the ministry of Jesus. Now, in the case of Jesus, we know that this whole institution of jihad was actually done once he had passed away. And we know how people who had denied him were wiped off by the incursion or the attack which was made by Titus Rumi, the Roman emperor, in around 70 AD. So we know that Jesus passed away somewhere between 50 and 50 AD, and in the next 15 years, the people who had intentionally denied them, they were actually taken to task. And Titus, the Roman emperor, he had actually destroyed Jerusalem totally and decimated it. So one of the objections that they put forth was the institution of monasticism or Rahbaniya, which they had adopted, which actually was something which stopped them from waging war. And they were the ones who would devote themselves in monasteries to please God. They are the ones who are presenting this excuse or this pretext that, well, if monasticism is something which has been preached by these prophets of God, especially Jesus, then how can we actually think of even waging war? Because monasticism is totally opposite to waging war. So they are being told that as far as monasticism is concerned, Jesus never ever preached it. They are the ones who invented it for themselves. And it was God who actually never made it obligatory upon themselves. This is something which they did for themselves. And one thing which this verse actually points out, which is something that we must also note, is what is mentioned by these words, وَجَعَلْنَا فِي قُلُوبِ الَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوهُ رَأْفَةً وَرَحْمَةً, which mean that the followers of Jesus, they had a very special trait, and that is that they had a lot of compassion and mercy being inculcated in their hearts by the Almighty. And I think that this you can even see today in our in contemporary Christian world. The amount of compassion and mercy that they have, which God has actually praised here, is something which is baffling. It's amazing, and you find it not rivaled by anyone else. The amount of work which Christians do vis-a-vis their compassion and mercy and looking after other people, and the way they spend their lives devoting themselves for so many such causes is unbelievable. And this has a lot to do with what God has said there, that the followers of Jesus, they were given this special gift of compassion, and this is something that we can even see today. And finally, this verse, this passage ends on these verses which say that those among these people who were to adhere to faith, they were rewarded, but most of them turned out to be disobedient, which of course we can clearly observe. Okay, now we are moving to the last part of the surah, and it says, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu taqullaha wa aminu bi rasulihi yu'tikum kiflayni min rahmatihi wa yaj'al lakum nuran wa yaj'al lakum, I'm sorry, وَيَجْعَلْ لَكُمْ نُورًا تَمْشُونَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ لِئَلَّا يَعْلَمَ أَهْلُ الْكِتَابِ أَنْ لَا يَقْدِرُونَ عَلَى شَيْءٍ مِّنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ وَأَنَّ الْفَضْلَ بِيَدِ اللَّهِ يُؤْتِيهِ مَن يَشَاءُ وَاللَّهُ ذُو الْفَضْلِ الْعَظِيمِ.
Abdul Rafi, now go ahead.
Believers have fear of God and profess faith in His messenger the way it should be professed. God will grant you a double share from His mercy and provide you a light with which you will walk on the day of judgment and will forgive you. God is very forgiving and merciful. Outdo each other to earn His mercy, so that these people of the book are not able to know that they do not have any control on the grace of God, and that the grace of God is in God's hand alone.
Thank you, Abdul Rafi. You are matching the voice of your sister Zoha, and it's so very enlightening and encouraging to see this energy in your voice just before Ramadan. Okay, so the word believers, my dear friends and participants, you can see it has been used in a very particular concept, in a particular context, and that is, it is the people of the book who are called believers here. And they are told that have fear of God and profess faith in His messenger, and you will be given a double share of God's mercy. You see, one, that you believed in your own prophet. Of course, if the addressees here are the Christians, then it would mean that they have believed in not only their own prophet, who was Jesus, but also in Prophet Muhammad, of course, and they later converted to Islam. So they would be given a two-fold reward. One of them would be because of believing in the prophet Jesus, and the other believing in Prophet Muhammad. So it's like something that you have to note as well, that it's not the case that the word amanu, whenever it occurs in the Quran, always does for Muslims. At times, as you can clearly see here, it refers to Christians as well, and people who believe in God, or lay claim to this belief, that they are being told that they should fear God and not only believe in Jesus, but also believe in this prophet, which is right before them, of course, referring to Prophet Muhammad. And then the surah actually ends with a note of rebuke, and it is that God is very forgiving and merciful, and once again, you should outdo other people to earn His mercy. And because of the fact that these people of the book are not able to know that they have no control over God's grace, because they think that they are the people who distribute God's grace, and it is they who, on behalf of God, are running these affairs. But they should know that God's grace only belongs to Him, and He gives this grace to whomsoever He would like to. So you can see the surah now ends on a very reassuring note, that as far as these Christians are concerned, they should realize that this is something which is going to happen in their own favor if they believe in God, because God is going to reward them doubly for their attitude. And as far as other people of the book are concerned, then they are doomed, and they will not even know that this attitude is leading them towards this doom. So we have studied this surah in detail, and one thing that you can see persistently coming up every now and then in the surah is that appeal to spend for the cause of God, to understand that this spending is not going to be wasted, but it's going to come back to them manyfold, and it's like a loan that you give to God. And also mentioned in the surah are some of the details that we have just discussed. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions to you just to further our discussion. In case you have any questions, I'll let you go first. But in case there are no questions, then I'll be asking some questions. So please let me know if you have any questions regarding the surah or any part that you have studied and needs any clarification. So my question to you would be that first, that do you think that this surah is a Meccan surah or a Medinan surah? Muslims are addressed in a very specific way in order to wage war or holy war against people who were denying their prophet. So this only occurs in the Medinan Surah, because you see, jihad is something which can only be waged through a state, through a properly instituted state. I mean, individuals cannot do that. This cannot happen in Mecca. This couldn't have happened in Mecca because, in the absence of any state, no jihad could have been done, even though Muslims have been severely oppressed in Mecca. So you can see the whole Meccan period is devoid of any militancy, any aggression from the side of the Muslims, simply because it was unwarranted. So any jihad that has to take place once there is a state properly installed. So in Medina, we found that the Prophet was installed as its ruler, and because of this, therefore, he was given certain directives, and of course the companions too, that they must prepare themselves for a final onslaught. Okay. Another question that comes to my mind is that can today also we can wage war against non-Muslims in order to create these small days of judgment, or these miniature days of judgment in our times, because after all, prophets of God, they punished people, they waged war in order to punish them for denying the truth. So can we do the same thing even today? For example, if I am living in a place like Turkey and it's a Muslim state, so one of the conditions of jihad is fulfilled, that I have power as a sovereign Muslim state. But if I see people around my country, if they are non-Muslims, and I see the companions waging war against non-Muslims and punishing them for not accepting the truth, can I do this the same today? If I, for example, live in any Muslim country, is that something that I am allowed to do today?
No, we cannot. We should respect every religion.
But why didn't the Prophet respect every religion? You see, in his own times, he actually waged war, or maybe he was given this directive, and the companions after him, they did so. So if they did something, why can't we follow, my dear Zohad? Okay, Amira.
I think why you can't do it, you can't wage war against anybody. And only the prophets could have done that because they were ordered directly by God to wage war against them.
And why
And
were
we,
they? Okay,
they were
mm-hmm.
they were told, because like over there they were sent down for this purpose, that you have to follow the religion because you've been given all the guidance. After, like, if like it was Prophet Muhammad and they didn't follow his guidance, like what God gave him, then there would have been war waged against them. Because after being given,
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
oh, after being given all the guidance, then they were actually, while knowing everything, then they were ignoring all the guidance.
Right.
So then they had deserved this. But we can't really do any war. We can't wage war against anybody because firstly, we haven't been given any direct um, order from God, and also that we don't know if we're standing on the right position either, or
Right.
we can't give total guidance to somebody else.
Absolutely correct, Amira. There are some more detail that another thing that is essential for to wage such a war is the presence of a messenger of God, and in the absence of messengers of God, this cannot be carried on, because it is only these messengers who are communicated by the Almighty that such and such a first people or a group of people have denied intentionally, And today we cannot have this knowledge in the absence of divine revelation. But there is one form of holy war that can still be conducted today. So, and I just referred this in the last part of this class of this session. So, anyone remembers that what I just said, that there, although this particular war, which just we just spoke of and which Amira actually explained, is something which has terminated and which cannot be conducted anymore, but there is another form of jihad which is still operational. So, would any one of you be remembering that? Alicia, do you have this in mind? I just discussed that at the very end of my session. Okay, Sine, would you remember that? Would you be remembering?
I think you mentioned something about oppression. So I think it was in refute to oppression, but I don't remember the exact guidelines. I think you said
Yes,
something else.
that's pretty much correct. So, as far as oppression is concerned, oppression means that you are unjust to your people, you deny them their basic rights, you persecute them, you do all sorts of bad things to them, and then some other country tries to stop you from doing this, and that particular country is also a sovereign country, and at the same time, they have done all the needful which is required to be done at the state level, at the level of negotiations, at the level of diplomacy, and still they don't abstain. So the Quran gives us this authority that in such cases, if there is this oppression and injustice going on in anywhere in the world, then if diplomatic ties fail, then this can be done. But remember, today there's another thing which is a hindrance in this, and that is that almost all the countries which are today in some sort of the other, they are some sort of sovereign states in the true sense of the word. They have all signed the United Nations Charter of No War, in which they cannot wage war against any other sovereign state. So the other thing is, which this exception has to be done away with, and that is that if such a situation arises, then first of all, this matter has to be discussed at a wider platform. And if you still agree that that thing is not going on in the right way, then you must first of all uh, uh, annul your membership, or you must back away from that promise or that commitment that you made. You must withdraw yourself from that membership of the United Nations, and then of course that is something that you can do. So you see, these all constraints are there before anything of a similar sort arises or even happens. Okay, one thing that I'd like to ask regarding the surah that we have studied is that we have encountered the term qarzan hasana, which means a good loan to God. So, would any one of you like to explain what this loan to God actually means? Are we actually lending to God something? Okay, Sine, go ahead.
I think the loan was in reference to what you do in this world and that you will be paid in the afterlife. So everything that you're giving, whether it be zakat or like how you do extra things in this life, even though they may be difficult and you go out of your way to do them, you'll be compensated in the afterlife.
So, a little addition to this, Sine, that you might note is that anything you do for the cause of God, it's like giving loan to Him. So, in those situations that we were just discussing, in those circumstances, the loan was needed for the war that was going to be waged. But anything which is needed for the cause of God in any sort of emergency situation is classified as qarz hasan, or loan, which is a goodly loan. And the purpose of classifying it, or actually labeling it as a goodly loan, is that it urges you to spend for the cause of God. Because if you're going to lend to God, then you can only imagine that when God says that He's not just going to return the principal amount, but also way beyond that principal amount. So it's like an appeal which God has made. And remember, this is something which God has done a lot of times in the Quran as well. So this, whenever you do something for the cause of God in all those contingent circumstances, it is as if you are giving loan to God. And this is such a beautiful way to express how we are related to to various directives of God, especially those which require our assistance or our support, and which in religious terminology is called nusra or nusrat, which means helping God's cause. Okay, so thank you very much for being part of this session. So, inshallah, our next class will be in Ramadan. So, My best wishes to all of you for the month of Ramadan. May it be a blessed Ramadan from all of us, and may we be able to reap all its blessings. And may the Quran that we study in our future sessions be able to win for us salvation and peace before the Almighty. So until next week, it is Khuda Hafiz, goodbye, and Assalamu alaikum from your teacher.